In a rundown trailer park on the outskirts of Leech, Texas, where rusty tin roofs shimmered under the southern sky, lived a 12-year-old girl named Sophie Lane. Each day, Sophie rose at 5 a.m., not to play games or pick stylish outfits like most kids, but to help her mom clean the modest bakery where they both worked part-time. Her mother, Joanne, was slender but strong, always saying, "You don't need wealth to live with kindness." Sophie didn't have many friends. Her school uniform was worn thin and patched, and her scuffed shoes made her an easy target at Winslow Elementary. She usually sat in the last row, quiet, distant, but her deep brown eyes held a kind of music, like songs she only dared to hum inside her mind. Before we keep going with Sophie's inspiring journey, if you too believe that someone's value isn't based on how they look or where they come from, but on heart and determination, please like and subscribe. Let's spread stories like this to more people. Now let's dive back into Sophie's path, where unexpected moments still lie ahead. One Monday, the principal's voice crackled from the loudspeaker.
It's Talent Week!
Anyone wanting to perform should sign up outside the office by Wednesday. The classroom lit up with chatter. Some bragged about doing TikTok dances. Others said they'd play piano or drums. Sophie said nothing, but that evening, after helping her mother wash dishes, she listened to an old tape her mom had once made filled with lullabies. She picked up a pencil and softly whispered, "I'll sing that one, Mom, the one you sang when I was sick, Scarborough Fair." She wrote her name on a scrap of paper. The next day, she stood still in front of the school's bulletin board. Her fingers shook. The list was already packed. Still, she drew a deep breath and added her name to the final line, Sophie Lane, singing within 10 minutes. Laughter echoed in the hallway. Sophie signed up to sing? Must be comedy. Maybe she'll use a rice cooker as a mic. She heard all of it. But she didn't cry. She just lowered her gaze and walked off, clutching the little notebook where she had carefully written the lyrics in her slanted handwriting. That night, Joanne found Sophie rehearsing alone in her room. Her voice trembled, but it was clear like a soft spring breeze. Joanne opened the door quietly, said nothing at first, then sat beside her daughter. "You know," she said gently, "I once dreamed of singing on stage too, but when Grandma fell ill, I had to leave school to take care of her. I never regretted it. But if I could see you take that stage, that would mean the world to me." Sophie looked up, eyes glistening. "Will you be there?" John nodded. "Even if I have to walk the whole way." At rehearsal, Sophie was the final act. The music teacher asked, "Do you have a backing track?" "No, ma'am. I'll sing a cappella." There was a sigh, a couple of eye rolls, but Sophie stood tall, shut her eyes, and began, "Are you going to Scarborough Fair?" No mic, no music, no lights, just her raw voice. Within seconds, the room went silent. The music teacher looked up. A teacher mid-pour froze, holding her coffee in midair. Sophie's voice slipped through the room like a whisper through cracks in a wall, soft, real, and unguarded. When she finished, no one clapped right away, not because they didn't enjoy it, but because they didn't know how to respond to something so honest and pure. On the walk home, Sophie asked, "Mom, if they laugh, should I quit?" Her mother smiled and gave her hand a light squeeze. "No, baby, you keep singing, because this world needs to hear voices that haven't been heard yet." That morning, the courtyard at Winslow Elementary was buzzing. Flags and streamers lined the halls, and a temporary stage set up in the school auditorium was decorated with vibrant balloons. The LED display flashed the words, "Winslow Elementary, let your light shine." Sophie Lane arrived early. She wore a plain white dress, the only one in her closet that wasn't torn. Her mother had carefully ironed it, pressing every crease. Sophie's brown hair was tied into 2 small braids. Her face looked a little tense, but her eyes showed quiet determination. In her hands, she clutched the faded notebook where she had written out the lyrics. Her mother stood beside her, holding her hand. Despite finishing a long night shift at the bakery, she had made sure to come. Her face was pale from exhaustion, but her eyes were filled with pride. One by one, students went up to perform. A modern dance group dazzled under strobe lights. A boy beat out rhythms on electronic drums with a speaker behind him. A girl in a frilly pink dress belted pop songs into a wireless mic. Each performance was met with cheers and applause from classmates. Sophie waited alone backstage. No one came to sit with her. A few sideways glances and soft giggles made their way in her direction. Some whispered, "Just wait. Here comes the fairy tale performance." Didn't bring music. Gonna sing a cappella. Then came the call. The young MC, One of the teachers introduced her with subtle doubt in her tone, and finally a solo act with no backing track. She'll be singing Scarborough Fair. Please welcome Sophie Lane. A few claps. Some students pulled out phones to record, some likely just for laughs. One even had a silly sticker ready to post on the school's app. Sophie stepped onto the stage. The bright lights made it hard to see the audience, but she knew her mom was sitting in the third row, next to the window. That was enough. She straightened her back, took a slow breath, and began. Are you going to Scarborough Fair? Parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme. Her voice flowed gently, like a breeze across a quiet field. It was soft, honest, without flash, but deeply moving. At first there were whispers, a few fidgeting glances, but soon the room stilled. Not out of boredom, but from something else. Everyone began to listen. A hush fell over the space. One of the music teachers who had been writing notes paused and looked up. An elderly parent in the back, silver-haired and wearing gold-rimmed glasses, quietly removed them to dab his eyes. Every lyric Sophie sang held weight. Silent sorrow, nights filled with hunger. Dreams never spoken aloud. No fancy effects, no choreography. Just a child offering her voice with full sincerity. When the final note faded, the silence remained. 3 seconds. 4. Then came the applause, not wild or rowdy, but filled with respect. And then someone stood up, the same elderly man, then another. Soon the whole auditorium rose in unison, clapping not just for a performance, but for something truly real. Sophie stayed rooted in place, hands clutching the edge of her dress, eyes glimmering, but she didn't cry. The spotlight warmed her face. She wasn't just the poor girl anymore. In that moment, she was an artist who had found her voice. Below, her mother slowly stood, one hand over her chest, eyes red but smiling with pride. After the show, just as Sophie was stepping off the stage, a woman in a crisp white blouse and name badge approached her. You must be Sophie, right? I'm Clara Jensen, conductor of the City Children's Choir. I was here for my daughter's performance, but it was your voice that brought me here now. Would you consider coming in for a studio audition? We have a special scholarship program. Sophie was stunned. She looked to her mother. Joan nodded, her eyes shining. Go on, sweetheart. The world's been waiting for a voice like yours. That Saturday morning, Sophie Lane stepped into a real recording studio for the first time. The walls were padded with foam panels, and the warm lights above cast a soft glow that made the space feel dreamlike and still. Outside, the streets of downtown Amarillo bustled like always. But inside that room, time seemed to pause. Clara Jensen had picked up Sophie and her mother from the bus stop. Clara, a woman in her 50s, had a gentle voice and sharp, thoughtful eyes. Think of today like a little adventure, she told Sophie. No pressure. Just sing like you did that day. Sophie nodded and held her notebook tightly like a lucky charm. She wore an old but clean white blouse and tidy jeans. No makeup, no special styling, just her plain and true. Leo, the sound engineer, sat behind the control booth. He had salt and pepper stubble and the calm air of someone who'd heard thousands of voices before. But when he saw Sophie step into the booth, he lifted his. Leo raised his eyebrows, not from admiration but surprise. This is the kid, he asked Clara through the intercom. Yes, she replied calmly. Trust me, Leo, just let her sing. Sophie stepped up to the microphone. It was too high for her, so Leo adjusted it to her height. Clara walked into the booth, placing a gentle hand on Sophie's shoulder. You can sing Scarborough Fair again, or anything else you'd like. Sophie glanced through the thick glass at her mother, who smiled back warmly. Then she turned to Clara and said softly, I'll sing that one. It's my mom's song. No background music, just silence. And then, in the stillness of the soundproof room, the voice of a 12-year-old girl began to rise. Are you going to Scarborough Fair? Leo sat perfectly still. Clara crossed her arms, her eyes growing softer with every note. Sophie closed her eyes, and each lyric floated from her lips like a warm breeze weaving its way through a space used to sterile, polished recordings. When the final note faded, no one spoke. A silence lingered, charged with something too deep for words. Then Leo leaned toward the mic. You haven't had any formal training, have you? No, sir, Sophie replied. Yet you managed to stay in rhythm, breathe with control, and sing with emotion without overdoing it. Your voice, it's not big, it's not perfect, but it's real. Clara re-entered the booth and gently held Sophie's hand. Do you know that Scarborough Fair is a folk song that's been passed down for hundreds of years? My mom sings it all the time, Sophie said. She calls it a lullaby for dreamers. Clara smiled. Maybe that's why your voice touches people the way it does. That same afternoon, Clara sent Sophie's recording to the admissions committee at Emerson School of Music. As an advisory board member, she knew their scholarship program reserved 2 spots each year for gifted youth from rural backgrounds. "You're not competing," Clara told Sophie. "You just have to be yourself." 3 weeks later, a pale blue envelope stamped with the school's logo arrived at their temporary address. Joanne, Sophie's mother, opened it with shaking hands. "Dear Sophie Lane, we are deeply moved by your submission. With unanimous approval from the committee, we are honored to offer you admission to Emerson's summer scholarship program in Austin. All tuition, travel, and housing will be fully covered." Joanne couldn't hold back her tears. Sophie simply stared at the letter for a long moment and whispered, "Mom, I got in." For the first time in her life, Sophie Lane didn't feel like the girl left behind. June in Austin shimmered under golden sunlight, the heat draping over roads lined with old oak trees. Emerson Conservatory stood quietly atop a hill, a red brick structure with stained glass windows etched by hand. For many students, it was just an elite summer program. For Sophie, it felt like stepping into another universe, overwhelming and delicate, like a fragile dream. On her first day, Sophie pulled her old suitcase across the polished floors of the dormitory, moving through a sea of classmates in floral sundresses, designer sneakers, and embroidered backpacks. They came from New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco. Some had vocal coaches since kindergarten, others had sung on international stages. Sophie, from a trailer park in Latch, had never learned music theory. She still carried her worn notebook of lyrics in her bag. The orientation was held in a domed hall. Clara Jensen, the same woman who had believed in her from the start, stood at the front podium. Her voice was calm but carried weight. "Here, we're not chasing perfection," Clara said. "We're looking for voices that tell stories. Sometimes the simplest ones echo the longest." But soon, Sophie realized that those ideals didn't always match the reality. Her first class, vocal anatomy, began with color diagrams of vocal cords, the larynx, breath control. Sophie had never seen or heard any of it. "Do you know if you're a soprano or a mezzo?" one girl asked. I'm not sure. You've never had training." Sophie offered a nervous smile. "No, I just sing with my mom." The answer earned her a few sidelong glances, as if she were a handmade trinket among polished machines. One girl, Eliza, from a prestigious arts academy in Boston, leaned over and whispered to her friend, "Looks like they picked the wrong girl this year." The next few days weren't kind. In harmony class, Sophie struggled to keep up with sheet music. During vocal technique drills, she lagged behind. Once overwhelmed with nerves, she forgot an entire verse mid-performance. The sting of being laughed at in her old school came rushing back, sharper than ever. One night, Sophie sat on the dormitory porch alone, gazing out at the dimly lit courtyard. The air was warm but heavy. Clara appeared beside her without a word and placed 2 cups of mint tea on the railing. "I don't think I belong here," Sophie finally whispered. "Why do you feel that way?" "I'm not like them. I don't know anything about all this technique, and I come from a place no one's even heard of." Clara looked at her with kindness. "Sophie, I was once a country girl too. When I arrived at conservatory, all I had was a battered guitar and my voice. People mocked my accent, laughed when I didn't know music theory. But then one professor told me." She paused and took Sophie's hand. "Technique can be taught. But emotion, that's rare. That's what moves people. And you bring that. Something many have forgotten, a reason to sing." Sophie sat in silence, never having thought of that as a strength before. A few days later, the class was assigned a solo piece for the final performance. Eliza selected a complex Italian aria. Another student chose a Broadway number that shimmered with vocal theatrics. And Sophie, she picked a simple country song, "You Are My Sunshine," the one her mother used to hum as they walked home in the rain, arms wrapped around a soggy box of day-old pastries. When it was Sophie's turn to rehearse, she stepped onto the stage alone. No backing track, no spotlight. Just her and the mic. Her voice rose again, gentle as breath, soft as memory, echoing into the still air. Eliza, seated in the front row, stopped scribbling notes. One of the instructors let out a long, quiet breath, as if something in the room had tugged at a childhood long forgotten. And when Sophie sang the final line, "You make me happy when skies are gray," no one clapped, no one moved, but everyone felt it. She reminded the room of something music was never supposed to lose truth. The final concert took place at Willow Hall Auditorium, a historic wooden theater that held over 500 guests. That day, light rain fell in Austin. Colorful umbrellas lined the front gate. Inside, the air buzzed with excitement. Parents, musicians, local reporters, even talent scouts filled the rows. Backstage, Sophie clutched a crinkled sheet of handwritten lyrics. Her dress was a soft blue gown, stitched together from 2 old blouses by her schoolteacher, gifted with love. Her hair was loosely tied back, and around her neck hung a small sun-shaped pendant, the only birthday gift her mother ever bought her when she turned 10. Joanne sat in the 4th row. Her clothes were plain, her hair still damp from the rain. She held a small box of pastries in a hand-embroidered handkerchief with her daughter's name. When she entered the auditorium and saw the luxury dresses, tailored suits, and glimmering watches of the other parents, she paused only for a moment. Then she thought, "My daughter will stand on that stage, and I will be the first to rise for her." The show began with dazzling classical pieces and Broadway solos that earned polite applause. Then the MC spoke. Next up, from Lac, Texas, young Sophie Lane performing "You Are My Sunshine." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some guests raised eyebrows, not expecting much from a folk song. Sophie stepped onto the stage, her legs trembling. The lights were too bright. She couldn't see her mother. She couldn't find Clara in the crowd. All she could hear was the thunder in her chest and the memory of a rainy day. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." Her voice emerged low, tender, and steady, a whisper from the soul. Every word wasn't just sung, it was lived. Her voice carried stories of blackout nights, shared slices of bread, and being held tight by a tired mother singing in the rain. "You make me happy when skies are gray." The auditorium slowly fell still. A parent in the 3rd row pressed a hand to their chest. A student intern covered their mouth. Clara, seated in the back, blinked back tears. "Please don't take my sunshine away." One person stood. It was John. She didn't clap, she didn't cheer. She simply rose to her feet, hands over her heart, silently declaring, "That is my daughter, and I have heard her with my entire life." 1 second, 2, then the auditorium erupted. Applause burst like a wave crashing onto shore. A few guests quietly wiped their cheeks. A journalist lowered their camera to clean their glasses. And Eliza, the girl who once mocked Sophie, leaned toward her roommate and whispered. Sophie bowed. This time she wasn't shaking, because now she wasn't invisible. She had been seen, not for perfection but for truth. The next morning, Sophie and her mother sat in a diner splitting pancakes. Clara arrived with an envelope in hand. "Congratulations," she said. "The Academy board met late last night. They want to offer you full admission to the year-round program. No re-audition needed." Joanne put down her fork, tears slipping down her cheeks. Sophie whispered, "Can I bring my mom with me?" Clara smiled. "If your mother is the reason you sing like that, then I think the school would be honored." Years later, during a televised interview, a host asked Sophie Lane, now a celebrated singer-songwriter, "What moment changed your life the most?" Sophie didn't hesitate. "It was the moment my mother stood up. When no one else knew who I was, she did. And for me, that was enough." And so the story of Sophie Lane comes to a close. From the back row to center stage. From a forgotten voice to a song that silenced hundreds. From sorrow to sunlight. If this story touched you, share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe to help preserve these rare, beautiful moments in our fast-paced world. We'll see you again on the next journey.